All right. I believe we is live. Uh, Hello, world. This is a somber occasion. We are the instructors of Guitar Cloud Symposium, and today we were going to talk to you about some techniques and tunes and all kinds of things, music. But uh, Eddie Van Halen has passed away, and that's what we're going to be talking about. You know, grief comes in stages. Usually it comes shock, sadness, all kinds of other emotions, and eventually there's a life celebration. I think we're going to go straight from shock to life celebration here. And I'll start because I would not be in my house without Eddie Van Halen. It's the Beat It solo is what bought me a house. And most guitar players that are making living playing guitar wouldn't be able to afford a house. And because I learned the Beat It solo, that's what did it for me. I was able to do that at the audition for Michael Jackson, and next thing I know, I had a career. So thank you, Eddie, for that and many other things. There are so many memories that'll just keep popping up. And as I was thinking of memories throughout the day, one of my favorites was I was on I was on tour with Michael Jackson on the Bad tour, and there was a break between legs of the tour in 1987, and I came home to LA and I had a gig with the band I used to play with, and as soon as I showed up, the manager of the band said, "Eddie Van Halen's next door and he wants you to play the Beat It solo." And I was so stressed out, and I had been in traffic and I was sweating and cursing, and I thought, oh God, no, it's just overload. And so eventually his tech came over and said, "Well, would you just say hi?" And I said, "Of course I would say, I would love to." And as soon as I came in the studio that he was working out some new stuff, checking out some gear, he put his 5150 Strat on me immediately. And anytime I play a guy's guitar, it comes down to my knees. I usually have my guitar kind of high. And he asked me to play the Beat It solo. So I did it because I had been doing that with Michael. And it was a challenge because his tremolo bar was loose and mine is set. So I always know where it is and I can set it a certain place and it'll stay there. And his was just swinging. So it was a little bit of a challenge, little stop and start. And then he grabbed the guitar and said, "How's that go?" So, the stories change over time. I heard you showed him the Beat It solo. Well, I reminded him because it wasn't something he played with Van Halen. It was, something he did as a one-off when Quincy asked him to come and do a session. So I want to motor mouth this whole time. Let's do some shares. Oh, you got the Van Halen shirt, Gretchen. How awesome was that?
I just realized we shouldn't have had you tell a story first. I don't have anything to follow that. I have a T-shirt. That's my story. No, um, no. I mean, God, I love that story, Jennifer. And honestly, you should. You have such a close connection. You were actually the second person. I called my dad first. I found out today from Max Crace, great musician, photographer, dear friend of mine. And I called my dad first thing because my dad did know, well, like had met Eddie when he was at Guitar Player magazine and gave him an award. I posted it today. But you were the second person I called. So yeah, I mean, I don't have any stories. I never met the guy. I just I feel so much the depth of the loss. And honestly, like I'm gonna mute myself because I've gotten much more emotional about the whole thing than I realized. I feel like he was common ground in a world that's very divided right now. He was common ground for musicians across generations and across genres. Like I don't know if I've ever met anybody who didn't really have a lot of great things to say. Even if the style wasn't their cup of tea, I feel like he was so respected for what he did.
Yeah, and I will say you were very emotional when you called me up because well, they say that 5% of your brain is the conscious brain, and there's 95% of stuff going on under the surface that you don't even realize how something like that affects you. There's so many memories over the decades of tunes. You know, we all know how tunes can absorb into our DNA, and you listen to a tune and it takes you right back there. In fact, of course, I was messing with wires and electronics and the usual chaos before a Facebook Live, but I wanted to share the intro to Mean Street, which isn't going to happen, but any Van Halen fan will have it in your head immediately. How it starts with a harmonic tapping thing and then goes into the most wicked, wicked feedback you've ever heard in your life. And I was listening to him, and I was still trying to be a jazz player. I was playing in a jazz club in LA, sucking probably, and I remember just not feeling great about the gig. And during a break, I went out in the parking lot and I played Mean Street. And it's almost instantly I decided I no longer wanted to play jazz because the energy of just those few bars, like 1 minute from the cosmos, I go, I want that. I want that. The creativity, the inventiveness, the wickedness. You said something on your Facebook today about a reckless abandon or something like that in his playing.
Yeah, I think I said like joyful recklessness or something like that. There was
Yeah.
just this the spirit that's so rare and so beautiful.
Yeah, and that's something, guitar players think of him as he's the guy with the cool solos, but it runs such a spectrum. It's like Michael Jackson's known for his music, but then there's his dance and his vision and the special effects, and it's just this ball of creativity that runs into all aspects of him, including the paint jobs he'd do on his guitar. I don't think there's a soul on earth that can see those red, black, and white stripes and not know who that is. you know, as it's so identified from so many different aspects. Uh, his creativity is so huge. And one of the things he would do is add sections to songs. He might have a real creative intro to a song where most songs back then especially and now would have a intro, verse, chorus, maybe a solo, bridge, and out. And he would take the solo sometimes into this whole different thing so that by the end of the song, you really felt like you were swimming in a story. And so much of it was unpredictable. I remember I had a friend in a car one time and I was playing him one of his solos and it was so off kilter. You just felt like, oh, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. One is going to come and he's not going to be there. And bam, he was always there because he had such an enhanced feel, probably from growing up with his brother, Alex, that they did some pretty advanced stuff rhythm wise. And he had that in his solos. In fact, last week I did an interview with Dweezil Zappa, who was doing a series on decline calls. Don't they know? Dweezil's doing a series on different albums of Van Halen, and with Premier Guitar, and they asked me to pick one, and I said 1984, and they go, no, somebody else has it. And I go, it has to be 1984. I remember walking into Tower Records when I first heard it playing, and it's one of two records in my life that I knew the day it was going to drop. And it was like countdown. Every day you wake up, it's a day closer to the new record. It was so exciting. And I wrote out every single note of every single solo in 1984. And why would anyone do that to themselves? Because it is not just eighth notes or sixteenths or triplets. It's groups of 9, 13, just this wild shit that would somehow land on one. It was so advanced and so difficult to write out. I got to stop motor mouthing. And Angela, tell us your Van Halen experience.
I never met him. I wish I had, because I have a lot of friends who have met him, and the common thing that was the thread with all of these stories was how wonderfully kind he was, and like what a genuine heart he had. My friend Michael Lemo, who I play with at Norman's Rare Guitars, hosts the Guitar of the Day, huge Van Halen fan. And he was saying how he met him when he was 14, and he tells the story and how he meets him at a friend's house, and he goes, "I play guitar too." And he says Eddie's eyes just lit up, and for hours they were talking about gear, and he says he could not have been nicer and was just such a wonderful human being. And I think moments like that to a kid who's wanting to figure out, okay, is this music thing for me, and is this my path, when someone is genuinely kind like that, like what a huge impression that makes on another human life. That is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And this is just one story I've heard about him, just at how kind he was. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to leave behind. I mean, not only the music, which of course is great stuff. For me, I was 10 years old. I remember first hearing Eruption. My uncle was in the car and he was playing. He was a huge Van Halen fan. And he turned around and he goes, "Listen." And I was sitting in the back seat like, "What is that?" And I just started to play guitar. He goes, "If you can learn how to play that, I'll buy you a guitar." I haven't, it is just, it's incredible. It's incredible what he has left. And I think his reinvention of the craft and this new vision of the craft, I think is really great. I went to the Play It Loud exhibit last summer at the Met, and he had his guitars there and his rig, and it was really, really cool to see his rig alongside Jimmy Page and Tom Morello and Keith Richards, and Van Halen too, and this wonderful, quartet of guitar heroes and awesomeness. But it was a shock when I found out today. I was actually at a studio and found out, and just took my breath away. But what a beautiful human he was, and what beautiful music he's left for all of us.
You got something, Vicki? So you.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I'm an acoustic guitar nerd, and I grew up learning folk music, James Taylor, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Joni Mitchell, the Beatles. Van Halen was just this, he was like a comet that flew by me musically, that I never was in that world. I never listened to any of that music. And although my brother was totally into it, but so it's like, I feel the enormity of what he was, and how he kind of burst open this creative pathway, and I feel the enormity of an icon, of a somebody, in just the bigness of what he brought, and who he was. So it's like I'm kind of feel left out of this conversation, but I'm just loving getting the stories and getting the energy and getting the Van Halen-ness of as you all are talking about it. It's like, okay, I didn't really know him and his music then, but like I'm just kind of getting the infusion now, which I love, and I and yet I feel the heaviness of his passing. The one person that I spoke to today who knew him was my neighbor Manolo Badrena, who's a percussionist who was with Weather Report, Spyro Gyra, and played as a side person on everybody's records forever. And Manolo was really a jazzer, but he said, "I met Eddie and he was the sweetest guy. He was just the nicest guy." That's what he had to say about him, So it's just, I'm just loving that you all are talking and I get to kind of take it in. So I'll shut up now, let you talk some more.
You could tell that he was having such a good time on stage, where a lot of bands back then were trying to be super macho and tough, and you would never see a smile out of anybody on stage. And there's only two people, Eddie and Larry Carlton, that you will not see them play when they're not smiling. It's just attached, It's like it pulls at their heartstrings, and I think that's one of the reasons they they got so popular. I mean, there's many aspects to it, but people want to have a good time. They don't want to just hear music. They want to have a good time, and they want to know that you're having a good time, and it becomes infectious. This ball of energy that goes back and forth. And I got to see him a couple of times, and the first time I had broken my knee, and I hobbled in there with a cast. And it was one of those concerts where everybody's on their seats. And so it's like, oh, God, it's not so easy to get on your seat to be as tall as everybody when you have a friggin' cast on your leg. And I remember I had this idea, how cool would it be to get Eddie to sign my cast? I'm here with 20,000 people, right? And I saw somebody that had a Van Halen jacket, some rough-looking roadie. And I asked him if I could get back to get my cast signed. He was so mean to me. It was like, I'm sure a lot of people were asking, hey, I want to meet Eddie because I play guitar, right? Me and 19,000 other people. But, oh, man, he kind of single-handedly invented the guitar solo. I mean, a cappella, without anybody else. With Eruption, he comes up with Cathedral, where I remember I used to, that's one article I would read in every guitar magazine, is when Eddie was interviewed, because there was always some magic nugget of information that you could take away, and things I remember to this day. But on Cathedral, I remember he was rolling back his volume. That's how he's getting that swell. And he did it so much that the volume froze and just stopped working. It's like, that's a lot of back and forth with a volume pot. And another thing, you know, we were just used to him coming up with new inventions. Here's a new record. What's the new invention? And at one point, he had invented a table that would go up against his body like this way and out this way, so he could set the guitar on it and play it like a piano, because he was also a piano player. So he was trying to take tapping to the next level, and he ditched the idea because it kept breaking. How about some favorite songs?
God, there's so many. I did have one story I realized it wasn't my story, but it's my dad's story. So maybe it makes sense to tell it. I'll actually read his words because I posted it. So here's this. It's posted on my page, but this is my dad giving Eddie Van Halen the Reader's Poll Award for Guitar Player magazine in 1980, and so my dad writes, "A sad day indeed. It's such a sad and in such a sad and painful time. I knew Eddie from when he still lived with his family and played both guitar and piano. I have too many stories to tell, but I often have said there may be millions of guitar players, but only a dozen or so are unmistakable voices honored by imitation over decades. Van Halen was certainly one such miracle. When he sent me his first ever EP, I called the staff in to hear something new and arrived worth an immediate meeting." So I remember always hearing this story of my dad, you know, hearing this like kind of just demo tape, and listening to it and basically like stopping everybody at Guitar Player magazine and being like, everybody get in here right now, and all of them listening to Eruption together and debating, you know, what it is or, you know, what it meant. And I'm friends with some of the guys from that era of Guitar Player here. So if anybody's watching and I got it wrong, feel free to correct me. But that was the story that I always heard and treasured, you know. And this picture of my dad with Eddie's been on my bookshelf from many moves, but basically I think, you know, since college.
That's a big deal, because especially people that work at guitar magazines and are around guitar players all the time, how can you not get jaded?
Right.
You know, all these flying at you.
And to hear them talk about it, in fact, actually, Jazz Obrecht has another great story. So he worked with my dad, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did the first ever cover story on Eddie Van Halen. And from what I remember, he was at a concert, I think in San Francisco, some Bill Graham presents something or other. I think it was like one of those multi-band kind of big things. And I think he got stood up by somebody. I don't remember who it was, but he got stood up by somebody for an interview. And he was playing basketball with some skinny dude on the basketball court, and they were talking and shooting hoops together. And Jazz mentioned, "Oh, this guy stood me up for an interview." And the guy he was playing basketball with, he's like, "Why don't you interview me?" He's like, "I'm a guitar player," and it was Eddie Van Halen before anybody knew who Eddie Van Halen was.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. You're talking about moments that you remember. When I had heard him when I was at GIT, which is now MI, and I was trying so hard to be a jazz bow. Somebody put headphones on me with Eruption really loud in my ears, and I wasn't having it. I wasn't digging it. It took probably at least another year or maybe 2 years before I go, oh, I see what y'all are talking about now. I was at a rehearsal with a cover band in San Diego, and it's one of those things that a moment that just stands in your brain for the rest of your life. We were setting up gear and had the radio on, and Beat It came on for the first time. And we all just stopped and stared at each other when the solo came up. We were like, what was that? Because this didn't sound like your average pop band worked out solo. It was just so wicked and so animalistic and so crazy. And I knew immediately I wanted to learn it. And back in those days, it was cassette days. And I had the Marantz cassette deck that was analog. And it was all the rage with musicians because you could slow music down, but it would also change the pitch. So I would take it down a whole octave. And so I gave up 3 times because I didn't know some of the things that he was doing. I mean, starting with the first note of that solo comes from hell. It's just like so far down there with the bar, it had to be touching the body of the guitar. It's like, and then the tapping harmonics in that, and the note tapping. I got frustrated several times, and perseverance pays off because when I finally got it, it eventually bought me a house. And I'll tell you, was it last year? I realized that the 25th anniversary of the 1984 record was coming up, and I thought, man, how fun would it be to do a tribute to that record because it's so badass. Every song on it is so great. And then I listened to it a bunch of times, and I go, why would I do that to myself? There's some difficult stuff on there, and I did jump in and learn. Oh God, was it Hot for Teacher? Yeah, that's pretty badass. It starts with the drums. Oh my God, you put on your seatbelt, and there is no stop until the end of the song. Very difficult. I must have played the solo 1,000 times, and every night on stage it was a little bit shaky. So I'm glad that idea just kind of came and went.
It's so interesting that, I mean, if we think about how much guitar has moved ahead, like, like Jennifer, you always talk about how like there's some like, 4-year-old in some distant country who's just like killing it. But it's so interesting to think how long ago it has been since Eddie kind of snapped everybody's heads, and how by today's standards, amongst some of the most, badass players like yourself, Jennifer, like how his playing absolutely is still relevant, challenging, terrifying.
Okay.
It's like it isn't one of those things where it's like, oh wow, look at how much we've grown, aren't we, haven't we learned so much better. It's like he's still so kind of essential, I feel like. And I had a similar experience actually to what you just mentioned, which is when I was Eddie Van Halen was iconic, before I even like thought about the guitar. And so when I started learning guitar, everybody was always telling me, Eddie Van Halen, you have to learn Eddie Van Halen. My first guitar teacher was, really into him, like your uncle, Angela. And it was never like that I didn't totally like him, but I wasn't yet evolved enough to understand why he sounded different from every other guitar player I ever heard playing rock. And it wasn't until I got further along on my own path before I realized, oh, everybody's trying to sound like him. Like he just defined a sound. And I feel like the more I learn and grow, it's almost like Mozart. The more you learn about music, the deeper you realize the person was, and the more you realize, oh, they're not overrated. They are 100% not. They are every bit as awesome as everybody says they are.
That brought back a memory of when I first learned the Beat It solo. I played it in a cover band for probably a year, maybe 2 years before I moved to LA and eventually got the gig with Michael. And you can't play along with it without it making you feel a certain way. You know, it's not just about playing the notes, it's about really digging in. And when I started playing it with Michael, I was disappointed. I wasn't feeling that feeling anymore. And I thought in the beginning that, well, it's because there's 50,000 people out there and I'm nervous, or, you know, it could be because I had this fucking dragon on my head, you know, kind of distracting me. But a month or so in, I got a hold of a live audio tape and I compared it, and I realized that we were playing it so much faster than the record. Like we did a lot of songs. Working Day and Night was just off to the races fast compared to the original. And I guarantee that if Eddie had been given the tempo that we were playing it at live, it would be a whole different solo. So, yeah. You tributes out there, that's the one thing that the tributes always do, is try to do the live tempos. And unless you got people like with the talent of a Ricky Lawson and Greg Fillinganes that are super funky at any tempo, don't do that. You know? I'd say somewhere between the record tempo and the live tempo, a happy medium would serve you well.
That is such good advice, Jennifer. It really is. Thank you.
Well, the tempo can suck the life out of a song if it's not right. You know, it can either drag or it can be too rushed, and you're just not emoting the way the song was meant to be. Oh, boy. I made a few notes. I remember when the news came out, it was like the biggest news. Breaking news, Eddie Van Halen cut his hair. And it was such a big deal. And I remember I was really disappointed. Oh my God, how could he do that? Ah. It was all about, you know, he had a look. It was almost like Eddie Van Halen took the stripes off of his guitar. Why would he do that? But he was a trendsetter, right? He did that, and then everybody followed. Changing it up. I mean, that's what creative people do. They're changing all the time. What's next? What's next? What's next?
I feel like he's got the same mojo that Jeff Beck has, which I say is the Midas touch of badassery. It's like, oh, now this is badass because I'm doing it. And it's like they just have that. They have that mojo.
Yeah. I agree. Which reminds me, one night after a show, Jeff and the crew and the band was hanging out in Europe at a piazza in Italy somewhere. And they spent the whole night talking about British TV shows I had never seen before. So I was kind of the third wheel out. But afterwards, we walked back to the hotel. It was like, and Jeff goes, wait a minute. It's 2:00 in the morning. We've been drinking for 3 hours. That's rock and roll. That was a moment. Leather jacket. That's rock and roll. Yeah, there are people that just exude cool. And that's something you can't fake. You got people that try to be cool and then people that just are cool. Wow.
There's a couple of really cool comments here. I'm trying to keep an eye on the
Oh, thank you.
thread here. Werner, who was at the last Guitar Cloud Symposium, says, my guitar teacher, Greg Howe, we know Greg Howe, don't we? Always tells me, if you want to learn rhythm guitar, listen to Eddie. Everybody thinks of Eddie Van Halen as a finger tapping lead player, but there's so much substance in everything else he did. I agree. I've always said, like, if I had to pick, I don't like to play favorites. A favorite rhythm player of all time, Eddie is for me, for sure. Um,
On the money, and so creative with the rhythm playing.
yeah.
I mean, it's just fun. Never mind the solos. It's just fun to play his grooves. And he brought new chords to rock that you would never hear, uh, like in Hot for Teacher. Is it there's a F major seven flat five.
Mm.
You don't hear that with a Madonna song. No, that's not ever gonna happen.
And there's a beautiful relationship, I think, when you play with siblings too. There's this just unsaid chemistry, and feeding off of one another. And I think that was very, very present with the two of them.
Yeah, that deep rhythmic sensibility. It was really,
Yeah,
yeah.
special.
And then he gets an award for best keyboard solo in Keyboard Magazine. In Jump. That's like I saw John Jorgensen, he's probably in my top 5 guitar players, and I went to see him play, and of course he's just slaying everybody, just blowing my mind. In the middle of the show, he breaks out a clarinet, and that was my favorite piece of the night. It's like, oh, just stop it with the creativity. It's just
Like
overload.
Tommy Emmanuel, like I if you guys have ever seen him live, Vicki, you must have played with him.
Yeah, I played with him in Europe a couple times.
I always say that, like, to me, the best drum solo this side of Moby Dick, Tommy Emmanuel did on a guitar. Like, he does this, like, it's this epic, amazing drum solo, but it's played by a guitar player on a guitar. It's
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. What's the name of that piece?
I don't know,
Okay.
but it's yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, a shooting star like Van Halen does not come along very often. It's decades. I think the music industry has been waiting for the next Van Halen since the early 80s, and it hasn't happened. There's a lot of great players out there, but to have all of those elements, that special thing that you can't touch, you can play the same notes, but it ain't it. It's like watching Michael Jackson dance. He had the best dancers in LA with him, and you watch them all do the same moves together, and there's a grace that Michael had that just set him apart. And he will be sorely missed. He left us so much music, thankfully.
He made us all better, It's like right when, you know, Hendrix did it one time, and then, Eddie came and everybody had to get better.
Yeah, I think he's probably personally responsible for a few $1 million in guitar sales because it was so inspiring. Everybody wanted to feel what it felt like to play like that, and so people strive to learn all those new techniques and sold a hell of a lot of pedals too. I wonder how many phase pedals alone that he sold. It's like we got to have that one. You can't not.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Just crazy. Life is precious.
It, boy, howdy.
Yeah.
It always happens. You never know what you got till it's gone. And every time somebody passes on, you go, reminder. Tell people you love them. Appreciate the hell out of the people that mean the most to you. And, whether they're family, friends, or somebody that you haven't met, that you just admire, that energy is in the universe. And I don't know if there's anything more to be said here.
No, I'm just glad we got to chat about it. It felt like it feels profound, and I've been getting just texts and calls from fellow guitar players and friends and people who you wouldn't even think would be feeling it a lot. Or, I think everybody's feeling it in some cases more than they expected. So I'm glad to get to chat with it. And man, Jennifer, your stories.
I know.
I feel so
Wonderful.
blessed that I was able to meet him. I actually, I met, the first time I met him, he was at a NAMM show, and Floyd Rose had a little thing off to the side after the show, and I got his autograph.
Shit.
That must have been, gosh, 82, 83, something like that. Back when you could lie your way into the NAMM show with a fake ID.
Not anymore.
Yeah, they've gotten pretty tough about that. Well, I think everybody light a candle tonight and send him off into the next universe.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for hanging out, you guys. I'll get back to answer questions. I know I was streaming on 2 Facebook pages and YouTube, and I always forget to tell people that we're all over the map, but I'll get in there and answer questions. All right. Thanks for hanging out. We